I try to start most of my classes talking about strategy, because everything that a company does should start with understanding the strategy behind who they are and why they're doing what they're doing. So if I teach management accounting, I start management accounting with strategy, because that drives what management accounting is. And the same is true here. Financial statements are static. They're as of not only today, they're as of the last financial statement. You need to take that information and project into the future. What do we think this company is going to do over the next 10 years? And from this, using finance type techniques, you put a value on the company. And so when you think about it, this course answers the question, why? That's the purpose of this course. Why do we do accounting? Right? Well, why is it important that all the numbers related to a company are made public and clear, and you know, things like GAAP are out there to make sure that people are staying within a certain set of rules when they put out their numbers? Why? And the answer is that so that stakeholders, those people who are interested in that company, can make a fair appraisal of the value of that company. Not looking into the past, but looking into the future. And what this course does is it answers that question, using the accounting information, the static accounting information, to project a value on a company. And we see this all, I mean, how many of you follow the market, the stock market, to some degree? Okay. You will, more and more. But every time an earnings estimate comes out, stuff happens. Buying and selling, you know, did they meet expectations? Did they not meet expectations? What analysts are doing, what financial analysts are doing, is they're taking that snippet of information and within their own models, which are simplifications of what we're going to do in this class, they figure out what is that earnings bode for the future value of that company, and so what does that mean for the stock price of that company? That's what happens in the market all the time. And so this course will take us there. It's kind of the junction between accounting and finance. So first, let's talk about understanding the industry economic characteristics. We'll talk about it from two perspectives, primarily from something called Porter's 5 Forces model. How many of you have heard of that model? Oh, everybody. In past years, that's not the case. And secondly, something called the economic attributes framework. So let's do that first. Before we do, we should know that every industry has its own economic footprint, right? Grocery stores, very low profit margins, 3.5%. But a pretty good return on assets, based mainly on the fact that they turn their product they turn over their inventory very quickly. And that's what drives their return on assets. And they have a middle amount of long-term debt to total assets. Middle amount, middling. Pharmaceuticals, a reasonable profit margin. Very nice. You know, kind of in the middle in their asset turnover. A pretty good return on assets. They take on a lot of long-term debt also, or a pretty good amount of long-term debt, because they have to fuel their research and development. And then utilities, I won't do all of them. Utilities, a decent profit margin. A very high long-term debt, because they have to pay quite a bit for property, plant, and equipment. A lot of infrastructure, a lot of if it's a nuclear plant, you have to build the nuclear plant, and so they need a lot of debt up front to build this infrastructure that's going to then fuel their business. So every industry has a different economic footprint. You would expect to have different results for different industries. So now let's lead into strategy. I started my career at Arthur Andersen in consulting. Became Accenture, just so I want to make that clear. I saw this quote from day one, and I love this quote, so I show it to you. If you don't know where you're going, you will never be lost. Right? Dumb, fat, and happy. So you need a strategy. And when you have a strategy, you get uncomfortable because you may not be meeting that strategy. But without having a strategy, yeah, you'll be comfortable, but you'll just be, dumb, fat, and happy. So that's why you have strategy. Porter's 5 forces. You have to think about the power of your suppliers, the power of your buyers, your industry rivalries, the threat of substitution products, and the threat that others can come easily into your industry. I thought an interesting starting point for this could be to actually see Michael Porter talk about it. Any of you know who Michael Porter is? He was a professor, or he still is a professor at Harvard. When I got my master's back a few years ago, is when this was fresh. This first came out while I was getting my master's, and we learned it then. And so if we could learn it then, we could learn it now. So let's just, it's a 15-minute video or 13-minute video. We're only going to watch the first 5.
I'm Tom Stewart, editor and managing director of the Harvard Business Review. Our guest today is Michael Porter, professor at Harvard University and head of the Institute for Strategy and Competitiveness. He's the author of the forthcoming HBR article, The 5 Competitive Forces That Shape Strategy, a reaffirmation.
Yeah, but that's, sure. I think I got it.
Update and extension of his groundbreaking 1979 article, How Competitive Forces Shape Strategy. Mike, thanks for joining the program. To start, let's remind our viewers of what the 5 competitive forces are.
Well, Tom,
Could it be interfering with this? Okay, well, we're not going to watch Michael Porter. But I'll tell you what he was going to say. In that video, he was going to compare 2 industries. The airline industry, which he calls a 0-star industry, and the beverage industry, primarily the cola industry, which is a 5-star industry. So let's think about the airline industry. The airline industry. How many of you have a favorite airline? Which is? Lufthansa. Emirates. The rest of us will just go where it's cheapest, right? Pretty much. And you'd probably, even with Lufthansa and Emirates, if somebody else was cheaper, you'd probably still go where it's cheaper. So let's look about the forces as it relates to the airlines industry. The supplier power. Who are the suppliers to the airlines industry? Boeing, General Electric, Airbus. The airline terminals who are charging rental space to be able to pull up to a gate. And there are a limited number of gates. The unions. The fuel, jet fuel. So do you think that these suppliers have power? They have a lot of power in the airlines industry. Every one of them. Who are the buyers? Us. Do we have power? Not really, but you know what? Our power comes from the fact that they're selling a seat, a commodity. And so we can easily transfer from one to another. But you're right in that we don't really have power because there are so many of us and we're all small and powerless in this industry. The threat of substitutes. High. I think it's low. Middle. Cars and buses and trains. I'm not going to travel. It's not worth the money. So there is a threat of substitutes. It's probably somewhere in the middle, though. If you have to travel, for the most part, if you need to travel long distances, you need to take a plane. Potential new entrants. It's actually not low. It feels low, but it's not as low as you think. Most of the airline companies don't own their planes. They lease them. GE owns the planes, GE financing. So it doesn't take that much to start an airline. EasyJet came out of kind of nowhere recently, and Ryanair, and not too many people choose to come in. Why not? How many airlines made money in the U.S. last year? For the last 10 years, Southwest, the only money maker. And the industry rivalry, are there lots of competitors? Not too many. Pretty good number. I mean, they're consolidating because of the challenge of profitability, but there's a pretty good number of competitors. Certain routes are less competitive, and one of the ways that Southwest initially made money was by going on those routes no one else wanted. That was one of their models. So when the forces are strong, profitability is low. And in the airline industry, the forces are strong. And we'll come back to the beverage industry in a second. And if you'd like to, just go ahead and cut and paste this when you get home, and it's a pretty good interview, and the first 5 or 6 minutes is really the best. So just to kind of summarize that, rivalry, is it concentrated or is it diffuse? Concentrated means are there very few rivals, or diffuse, are there many rivals? The fewer rivals you have, the lower the competition in general, and therefore the higher the profitability. So the fewer rivals. And what do some industries do to create fewer rivals? They create OPEC, right? Oil without OPEC would be a very diffuse industry. Selling a commodity product, if you had lots of competitors selling a commodity product, the price would go all the way down. So you need to turn it into an oligopoly, essentially, or a monopoly. Threats of new entrants. How easily can firms enter the market? Are there entry barriers? The utilities industry has an entry barrier, right? You've got to build that utility plant. Do the existing rivals have a distinct competitive advantage? I'd suggest that in the cola business, it's not hard to create a new cola, right? But it's hard to create one that the market will grab. So they have a distinct competitive advantage. It may just be marketing and perceived, but it's a competitive advantage. So the greater that the current entrants have, that lowers the threat of entry, which means you'll have higher profitability. The threat of substitutes. How easily can customers switch to a different product or service? And how likely are they to switch? Sometimes it's easy to switch. You could easily change your cola brand, but you're not likely to do that. On the other hand, the substitutes to the cola business are things like bottled water and other drinks that may be perceived as healthier. So the less likelihood of product switching, the lower your substitution threat, the higher profitability. The power of the buyer. The more buyers out there, the less power they have. You want to be the most important buyer. You want to be Walmart. Walmart has the power over its providers. It's the buyer of product from lots of companies, and it has the power. But you and I, when we buy something, have very little power. So the more diffused buyers there are, the lower the buyer power, the higher the profitability. Supplier power. How much leverage does the supplier have in negotiations? If there are lots of buyers who want a product from a given supplier, that supplier has the power. A good example of that would be Intel. People want, when PCs mattered, PC companies wanted Intel inside. Intel had a limited number of chips they could make. They had the power to charge the price they felt was appropriate. So if there are many suppliers, then the supplier doesn't have much power, and that's better for profitability. But if there's an important supplier you need, that supplier has power, and that will impact your profitability. So those are the 5 forces. And let's just think about those 5 forces as it relates to the cola industry, specifically to the cola industry. Buyer power is low. There are a few sellers, really only 2. How many of you drink RC? RC Cola. Yeah, that's number 3. So Coke and Pepsi. Very few sellers and many buyers. So the buyer power is low. Supplier power. It's a secret formula, right? We don't know what's in Pepsi. But I'm pretty sure it's nothing that costs a whole lot of money. I taste a little cinnamon in there. It's a lot of product that you could buy, relatively cheaply. These raw materials are most likely commodity products. So the supplier power is very low as well. You can go lots of different places to buy cinnamon or whatever they're putting in it. Caramel coloring, high fructose corn syrup. Competitive rivalry, your first inclination is to say, it's high, it's Coke and Pepsi, they're banging at each other all the time. Hey, but it's not a bad thing to be 45% of a market in any case. So you're banging each other for that little bit on the market. So I would say the competitive rivalry really is low. Because while I do have this intense competition, it's very concentrated, just 2 real players in the cola market. I don't know, but right up there between the two of them, probably 80 in the cola business. If you just define that market, 85 to 90%, I would guess. Threat of new entrants is low. It's because if I came out with my cola and it tastes great, it's all perception anyway. No one's going to buy it. And they own the distribution channels already. You know, those distribution channels are established, whether it's at fast food places or in supermarkets. Threat of substitutes, moderate. I would say this is moderate and going in the wrong direction for the cola industry because of the sense of healthfulness. So those dynamics are changing. But generally, all in all, this is considered a 5-star industry, an industry you want to get into, or you want to be Coke or Pepsi. They make a lot of money. We're going to center a lot of what we do here about Pepsi. The textbook uses Pepsi as an example in a lot of things. Another way of looking at strategy is something called the economic attributes framework. I'll do this quickly. I think the 5 forces model is a better model to work with. It focuses on demand. This is all from the perspective of your company. Demand, supply, your manufacturing process, your marketing processes, and your investing and financing. Demand. Are customers price sensitive? Is the demand growing, or is it a mature industry? Do you have economic cycles that you're sensitive to, or seasonal cycles? Beverage industry, it's seasonal, right? You're going to drink more in the summer than in the winter, the cola. But it's relatively insensitive to economic cycles. You know, even if the economy is down, people are still going to kind of feed their sense of value by drinking a Coke. They're not going to say, oh, that's money I can save. Supply. Do other suppliers offer similar product? Are there high barriers to entry? Some of these things are the same things we saw in the 5 forces model. Is there a high barrier to exit? If you're in the nuclear energy business, there's a high barrier to exiting that business. Closing down a nuclear plant is not an easy thing to do. Manufacturing. Is manufacturing capital intensive or labor intensive? Do you use operating leverage? Would you rather have fixed costs to variable costs? Is the manufacturing process intolerant of error? Is it precise? Is this a business-to-business product you sell, or is it a business-to-consumer product? Does demand pull your product through the market, or do you need to push it out there and create demand for your product? Do you have short-term or long-term assets? Where is the industry on the maturity cycle? Is it a growth industry, or is it a mature industry, or an industry in decline? So if we looked at these things that related to the cola industry. Demand. It's insensitive to price. Very rarely do we really care what they're charging us for a Coke. You know, we don't think about it. I mean, if it's outrageous, we're not going to buy it. But we generally don't think about it. In the US, it's a flat market, but it's a high global growth market. And it's not, as we said, it's not sensitive to business cycles, but it is sensitive to seasonal cycles. Supply, there are 2 suppliers with high brand recognition. They dominate their distribution channels. Pepsi back in the 80s so wanted to dominate its distribution channels, it got into the fast food business. It owned KFC, Taco Bell. I don't believe anymore. They sold it. And Pizza Hut, and they did it primarily because they were in a battle with Coke, for who was going to be the provider of syrup to those businesses, and they wanted to make sure they won that battle. The fountain drink, yeah, the syrup. Whereas Coke has McDonald's, and I don't know who. I think Coke has Burger King too. I'm not sure. It's been a long time since I've been in a Burger King, and hopefully never again. So distribution channels. They got out of that business, but they served their purpose, right? Because once you've established either Coke or Pepsi as your beverage in a fast food restaurant, it's a dangerous change to change. You have customers who may be loyal to that brand. Manufacturing. The manufacturing of the syrup and the concentrate is not very capital intensive, but the bottling and the distribution is capital intensive. So what has Pepsi done? Anyone know? What has Pepsi done? They don't acquire the bottle. In fact, PepsiCo, the company, is not a bottler. It owns the trade secret. It creates the syrup, and then it sends it off to the bottlers. I'll be there in a second. To the bottlers, who are separately owned companies, but Pepsi has a large minority stake ownership, less than 50% ownership, but they let another company affect their balance sheets and their income statement. Right. So but you're saying they're wholly owned. Right. Yeah, Pepsis are not wholly owned. They actually have a minority ownership, purposefully. They keep a minority ownership. So that takes it off. I believe if you're wholly owned, it's going to be on the balance sheet. You have to consolidate. No, their bottlers are really at their whim.
Yes, that's a part of it. I mean, in reverse, I guess you have one client.
One could say it's a horrible industry, but when you have a product that's desirable, even if you don't have all the control you want, and you don't have the margins that you wish you had, you probably still get pretty good margins. And you make pretty good money in that industry. It's maybe not what it could be. It's not as good a business as being Pepsi, but it's a pretty good business by itself because it has a good product. Yeah, exactly. Any other questions or points? Brand recognition, marketing of these two. We all know about that. They're really advertising on the margin, just trying to improve their market share versus each other. That's the whole game for them. So these bottling plants require long-term financing. The syrup production does not as much. But it's, PepsiCo, the syrup producer, is very highly profitable, as you'll see. And they have a lot of excess cash because they print money. And so they use the excess cash from their US business to finance global growth. Okay, I thought this would be a good first exercise for you and your team, and I picked an industry that you all should know more about than me. So I'm interested to find out the answers to this. think of the 5 forces model as it relates to mobile computing. You know, games on mobile computers. Okay, so you have your iPhone or your iPad or whatever it is, and how many of you have a game on it? How many? I hope. I expect. Okay. How many of you are playing games while I'm talking? Think of the 5 forces related to that industry. As you are a developer of mobile computing games. And what I'd like to do is every team, let's take 10 minutes on this. So 20 after 11, or yeah, 20 after 11 on that clock. Let's regroup on it. So just 10 minutes. I'm going to assign each team, come around and assign you one of the forces to talk about with the class. But think about all the forces. Go on. Should I turn it off? You'll be able to trim it out, no problem? Okay. That was on mute. Yeah, it's okay. I don't care about that video anymore. It's over. Team 6, why don't you guys do barriers to entry?
Oh, we're doing barriers to entry?
Well, do all 5, understand the whole thing, but I'd like you to lead the discussion on barriers to entry. Okay? Team 5, competitive rivalry. Lead the discussion on competitive rivalry. Okay. Team 4, you guys do the whole thing, but you should expect to lead the discussion on buyers, buyer power. What's that?
This is just for the mobile phones?
Oh, no, any
Game in general.
mobile application. So some phones, iPad, yeah, just games though. Just games. Apps that are games. Apps that are games. Buyers of apps, the power of the buyers of the apps that are games. I don't even know if there's anything here you could do. Supplier power. But since this is a service, I don't know what you're going to do. You may have a very easy one or a very hard one, depending on where you take it, okay? So supplier power for people or companies that develop apps. So do the whole thing, but think about supplier power primarily. Threat of substitutes, okay? And there are only 5, and you guys are number 6. So you don't have anything this time around. You don't lead any discussion. Oh, you'll get another one. Everyone's leading one of the 5 forces, but there are only 5 forces and 6 teams. So you get a reprieve this time. But yeah, still understand the 5 forces. Work together on that. And what?
I missed the assignment when I first came in.
Okay, why? Why did you miss it?
Well, I was like 2 minutes late.
Oh, but you won't be 2 minutes late anymore, right? Oh, okay. So what? But you have been assigned a team?
Yeah.
Okay. Who has the attendance sheet? You get. I'm a stickler on time, okay? Just so you know for the future. Thank you.
I don't know if I did. Who paid him? Apple paid him. That would make them. I still don't know the way it works. It goes through the little game, like.
Right. Okay. I thought we were gonna have. So, how many cameras do we have? Cameras. Well, yeah. Yeah. Right. So you're recording the professor as well. Two. I'm not so sure. And they buy new mics. And is this okay. This looks very similar to what we did.
Yeah, it's the same, but
At the same time. Just better.
Well, if you try to substitute the extreme, there's so many It's the barriers to entry.
No, honestly, my friend creates apps for, like, he created, like, a mirror, and it just has lights around it, and you can find, and, like, she has, like, little options.
It's okay.
I feel like you know,
Oh, no, no, entry barriers, that's under credit anyway. I think that's very common. And the other one's competitive rivalry.
I took it spring
Competitive rivalry would be a lot of well, because there's like a million of like even like similar games, like
About 3 more minutes to figure it out.
like I know you're saying that it's based off of like if it's a concentrator and like there's a lot of factors, so that would make it high competition. And they have them like if you go down the shore now, like they have them as like boardwalks, like in an arcade and stuff too, like it's like on a big screen.
Can somebody from each team maybe come up for the team that they're assigned? Just come up and write 2 or 3 things about that force, and then high, medium, or low power of that force. So someone from each team come on up and do that. Yeah, just one person come on up and do that. Yeah. Yeah. Whoever you want to do it. Take this course over. Okay, guys, let's come on up and go for it.
Where I am occasionally late. That's only because I come from the observer, so I do run into traffic on the turnpike sometimes, but hardly ever.
But you weren't late today because
I left at 8 in the morning.
I did too.
Where do you live?
Not far, Montclair.
Alright,
But the point is, traffic is something that I don't have a, because we all deal with traffic in our lives.
yeah. No,
Make believe this was every time you come to this class, it's an interview.
No.
What are you going to do?
normally I make sure I'm out of the house
Yeah.
by 8:15.
You were here plenty early today, so I know you can do it.
Yeah.
And listen, at the end of the day, if you're late every once in a while, it's not the end of the world. It's just a decision you made in some way, either knowingly or unknowingly.
Oh, if I'm not getting up, I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
I'm not getting up. I try.
I don't think I have it. I'm sorry, I don't think I have enough. Do you? I got one more.
Yeah, I think it doesn't help support barriers to entry, but it's a valid point.
I only have 4. Tell one of these guys to just give it up. I wonder if, since Sabor is in this class, why doesn't he take it? Unless you want to.
I would go moderate, yeah, because if you think about it, how many stupid updates do you get on your...
Okay. No, what'd she do? Oh, she's a weightlifter. Apparently she's a world-class weightlifter.
I heard that she was the champion.
Right. That's what I've heard. So she pulled a muscle? She hurt a muscle? Oh. Okay. Okay. I'm just
Taking the class.
Yeah.
This is
Macy. So it's like to get it's a Master of Accountancy. You need 150 credits in total. So they get 120 undergraduates, so they need 30 more credits, like 1 more year worth of work. And they get a master for 1 more year's worth of work. It's intense, yeah.
To the right is diffuse. So we're going to put 1 or 2 things here to fill up the space, and I got you. High is our answer.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of doing it there.
Okay, let's wrap it up here.
I'll be calling you Professor from now on.
And I'll be coming to you for shoes. That's why your team got stuck with. I saw you. I said, okay, I'm going to give them clothing. I should have given it to this team because it's all young ladies, and they would care more about Coach and Michael Kors. Maybe you could switch with them. What are their UPS and FedEx? You like this one? Okay, you got a lot of pressure on you. Okay. Thank you, guys. Your job at the end is to describe this as a 5-star or a 1-star or a 0-star. industry. Okay? Okay, so let's go through this. I like to hear what everyone says, and I don't have any preconceived notions. I made up this industry group because I would think that you all know it as well as I do. So who did buyer? The buyer force. Talk it through. So the buyer power is high because it's free. Anyone else have a thought on the buyer power?
I think that it could be low because being diffuse is a chance of making money in the market. Making money in the market, people pay for the market, pay for the one that they want. It kind of forces things on us that when you do a Google search, the first two things that come up with the things you click. So from the buyer's perspective, we can't want Apple tells us, this stuff on page 2 then from the mobile.
So that's interesting. Who's the real buyer? Who's the real buyer? I mean, we're the ones who are the downloaders, but the real buyer are the advertisers, right? They're the ones who need to decide whether it's worth investing advertising dollars. So what was your, at the end, what did you say oh, you said hi. I'm trying to think this through with you all.
It's moderate because there's a lot of suppliers, a lot of buyers. It's not like there's little buyers and a lot of suppliers. And vice versa, it's like a lot of buyers and a lot of suppliers.
Let's go with the idea that the buyer is the advertiser, right? They're the ones who are paying. Am I going to get the same advertisement as you? How does that work? You're right. There is also the end user buyer. There are those who are going to pay for certain games. Now let's think about the games you pay for. I paid for one game, and I have more than one. The only game I paid for is Scrabble, because it's a name brand, right? I'm more mobile. I'm talking more mobile. This is a tough one.
Online games are more advertisement-based, but mobile games are more people which are
advertisement-based. They want to push advertisements, and they're pushing those advertisements. Where I was getting at is, I'm not getting the same ad as you. Through Google, they know who I am a lot more than I want them to know, and they're pushing ads to me that they think I would be interested in. I think with all this said, I might go with the moderate. I don't know who said moderate, because there are a lot of forces at play. There is the fact that there are so many buyers, but there's also so many suppliers. So I think I'd go moderate, but we can make a case any which way. Sure, of course. Interestingly, Google's never the buyer. They're always the one getting the money. I mean, they're providing the information so that the advertisers are targeting.
From the industry side, it seems odd. If you were to go on a specific case-by-case basis where one game is very popular, then you gotta continue to try to get in there. Now the buyers at a weakness or it's low, but with the surplus of games out there, you just want to get content and try to force feed it down to the consumer and buy space and time for games. So,
Mhm.
I agree with you on that.
Okay. And I'm not sure I'm right, so that's what we have. Sellers, what do we say about the sellers? Supplier, yeah. Right. I think you're absolutely right, though, that the supplier is the programmer. That's really the only supplier you need.
Where do like Apple and Android and like the actual like devices that decide like if it's going to be on their device long? Because they have high power. Because like not all apps are compatible with Android.
Right. They have the power. But I think Android's not that selective. It's just that they're not. The app developers are developing them first for Apple and then
Like
moving
are they
into.
buyers and suppliers? Like who are they? Where are they?
I don't know that they're either. They're just kind of a.
Sort of like barriers to entry.
They're yeah. Okay.
Because they would have to provide by whatever rules Apple or Android phones have. So it would be ultimately up to them if they're going to be entering the market or not.
Okay, so when we get to barriers, let's talk about that, barriers. I don't think that they're suppliers, though. The suppliers are the inputs to creating the product. And the product is the game, and I think the input is the brain of a programmer.
So again, I'm just trying to maintain I'm low because there's so many games when you're marketing from Apple to Google. But again, the company specific can be high if your games are demanded and the platform wants you to do.
Okay? Oh, so you're saying low. How many of you say, we're going to go low, medium, high? How many say low? How many say medium? How many say high? Two of us. I would say high. I think that programmers are expensive, relatively expensive. And there are a lot of apps, there are a lot of programmers. Yeah. But a good programmer. You can offshore the work. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay. You all, we lose. I'm going with low. I think offshoring, that's a good point. Threat of substitution. Which team did that?
There were various points. If you're speaking specifically, there are different types of, there are many substitutes that go into different games, and they're easily duplicated. So if you take example of like Temple Run, there were so many spin-offs of that. So if you don't like one, there's always many options. And if you're speaking generally, then there are different game consoles that you can go to. Instead of having just plain mobile, instead of the iPad, you have like PlayStation, Xbox. There are very different types of substitutes.
Okay.
I have a question. For the substitutes, can we include items from within the same industry? Because I feel like other applications are in the same industry. Or we look for substitutes outside.
You're really looking for substitutes that are not game. You're looking for a substitute that's not a mobile game.
Right.
So a substitute for my mobile game of Scrabble is board Scrabble or something like that. Or reading a book.
Also, one more point. Due to the fact that entrance is high, it's easy to enter the field. There are many different substitutes just because there's so many developers.
Okay. That's Rivalry, yeah. Remember, substitutes are non-mobile games.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's why there are many substitutes, because it's. I go.
Okay.
You also said about there are many different apps that you can use instead of games.
Right.
So like Netflix, like Pandora or reading a book.
There are lots of ways to waste time. Yeah.
And waste your battery life.
Those substitutes would be low, I think. But Pandora and listen to music or watching Netflix or something, those are real alternatives. Sure. Okay. Let's do the same thing here. High. Threaded substitutes high. Medium. Low. I don't vote anymore. High one, I think, but there were a bunch of mediums, moderate.
You said high, medium.
Okay. Barriers to entry.
Wait, so for the substitutes, were we saying like board games are the substitutes or other apps?
Anything's a substitute. Just like a substitute for a cola, it could be bottled water.
Okay.
It could be orange soda. It could be Kool-Aid, whatever. Barriers to entry.
You said that the barrier of entrance is pretty high. Nowadays, we discussed the example of PepsiCo nowadays anyone can pretty much get into this industry of mobile gaming. We initially thought that the barriers to entry was low. We changed it to moderate because some people may not have much knowledge on how to develop an app. Some people may not have the adequate resources to develop an app. And then the reason why we changed it to moderate is because there's technology is changing at an extremely high rate, and it may not always be available to us for a certain time.
Okay. This is a dangerous one to talk about, only because threat of new entrants and barriers to entry are almost opposite to each other. So let's phrase it the right way so we're thinking the same way. When the threat of new entrants is high, your profitability will be low. When the barrier to entry is high, your profitability will be high. So let's talk about it in terms of threats of new entrants, just because that makes it consistent with the others. When the buyer power is high, your profitability is low. So if the threat of new entrants is high, your profitability is low. Okay? Any other thoughts on this? How many of you think that it's high? Moderate? Low? Spread out, but I think high. Sure. Right.
That's why the threat of new entrants is high. That's why the barrier would be low. That's why your money is
Small. Small. That's what we're saying here. That's what this says. This is the threat of new entrants is high. This is the threat of new entrants is high. No. Final is rivalry. Who is team rivalry?
rivalry
Okay. How many say Rivalry is high? Moderate? Low? Okay, so team 1 now, you get to see what we have here. We have high, 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 low, and moderate. They didn't get to do one of the powers. So they get to now tell us, is this a profitable place to be? Is this a profitable industry? Team 1. Any thoughts?
Well, it looks like a lot of the forces are strong, so that would mean that the profitability would be low.
That would mean the profitability would be low. Unless you're one of the major players. There are a few major players. Yeah. Yeah. There are probably 4 or 5 major providers of most of the games that are played. I mean, it'd be interesting to know. I have no idea about this. If you looked at the, you know, there are hundreds of thousands of different apps out there. You know, how are they broken down by company in terms of usage and download? You'll start to see more and more concentration over time, I would guess. Was there a point here? Okay. So that was kind of fun, right? Okay, the second step in the 6-step process is to understand, it's up there, you just don't see it, is to understand your company's strategy within their industry. Some companies could choose to differentiate their product some way. Others might just be a low-cost provider. And I'm sure you all have seen SWOT analysis. I'm not going to talk very much about it. I'll talk a little bit more about value chain. Bless you. So every company, for the most part, defines itself as either a cost leader or a differentiator. Sometimes the same company might choose to play in both spaces by branding separately. An example of that could be in the auto industry, where a Japanese automaker, I forget who's with who. Honda, is that with Lexus? Acura. Toyota with Lexus, yeah, whatever. So they have a cost leader product, and they have a differentiated product. So if you have a cost leadership product, you expect to outperform your competitors by producing at the lowest possible cost, consistent with quality demands. So this is not about creating a low quality product. I don't think Honda or Toyota is known as a low quality producer. They're just known as a mass market producer or a cost leader. A differentiator creates value and therefore profitability through product innovation, creating unique features that the customer is willing to pay for. So each company is looking to be one of these two or in some way brand them separately. RC Cola is positioned as a cost leader. For what it's worth, Pepsi and Coke are positioned as differentiators in some way. We're not going to do this now, but during the break, you're going to have a few things to do, including for your two companies, find their mission statements and determine whether they position themselves as cost leaders or differentiators. Now, a mission statement, some companies do a terrible job with mission statements. they're paragraphs. A mission statement should be a sentence. So try to find a sentence that defines your company. It should be a sentence that's pithy and gets the message out about who you are as a company. Value chain analysis. So for any industry, any company, you have a value chain from securing the raw materials through distribution and ultimately customer service after the sale. Very few companies do it all. Some do. Many companies do pieces of it. And a value chain analysis for a company says which components of this value chain are truly value added. Which components of the value chain should we do, and which ones should we stop doing? Should we outsource? Should we just don't need to do? Etc. So an analysis of the value chain is meant to streamline a business. So you look at each of the value chain activities and you understand it in terms of where you're able to add value to the company. Where are you, so Pepsi has said we add our value through our unique syrup. We don't add value by putting it into bottles and selling the bottles. Our value is in the unique formula and in marketing. And so that's what they do, and they've offloaded those things that are not of interest to them. Within the value chain analysis, you also look for opportunities to reduce cost for those items or those steps in the value chain that have to get done but are not particularly valuable to the customer. You try to outsource or reduce the cost in some way or possibly remove them. And are you exploiting linkages between steps in the value chain? Pepsi tried to exploit a linkage in the 80s when they bought Pizza Hut and whoever else they bought. That was extending the value chain through distribution. They were exploiting a linkage. This is a good quote. I like quotes. There is nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all. And this fellow, Peter Drucker, 1950s or so, the father of modern management consulting, said that. So value chain analysis is to figure out what you should be doing and only do those things. And we said this, Pepsi has chosen to do these steps and leave the rest to their bottlers, of which they have an ownership stake. Critical success factors relates to the value chain. Critical success factors are processes that deliver value to customers. So the critical success factors are those items that the customer values. Core competencies are related to critical success factors. Core competencies are those things that your company does well. And you're in pretty good shape if your core competencies match your critical success factors. You're good at what your customers want. And that's your goal. So it's the combination of the two that allows you to implement a successful strategy. What's Walmart's core competency? Anybody know? Have you talked about it in other classes? Supply chain. Working with, what do you mean by supply chain?
Well, they're like really good at, like their supply chain is so like tightly like done that they are able to do things at the lowest cost possible.
Right. They take advantage of their core competency, which is scale. That's the biggest core competency, scale. They're so big. Their critical success factor is low-cost provider, and they use their scale to deliver at a low cost. Target. What's the story with Target? Anybody know what their core competency is? That's true. So they compete with, they can't get to Walmart's price. So they have to have something a little bit more than that. And think about what their name is. So what, based upon their name, what are they doing? Very famous case recently. Target. What does that mean? The logo, Target. They think they know their customer. They try to know their customer. You know, the famous case recently is about a teenage girl was pregnant. Did you guys remember that article? Yeah, they were sending her mailings. Now they're smart. They didn't send her only mailings about pregnancy because that would be creepy. But like 1 out of every 10 mailings was about pregnancy. And the reason they knew she was pregnant, there were like 4 or 5 unique characteristics, one of which she was buying more hand cream or something. Yeah, true. She was buying hand, so they were able to use data analytics and say, this girl's pregnant, we're going to target her with pregnancy things. Her father saw these mailings coming in for pregnancy things and went to Target and say, why are you targeting her with this stuff? He had no idea she was pregnant. That's how he found out. Look it up. This is a famous article. I think it's in Forbes online. You could all look it up online. And then the father found out and he went to Target and apologized. So they have a core competency that allows them to be a slightly higher cost provider than Walmart. They can't compete on scale. SWOT analysis. How many of you have done SWOT analysis in at least one other course? Okay, we're done. You want to tie your critical success factors to your strategy. If you're a differentiator, product innovation is a critical success factor. Quality is normally a critical success factor. You want skill development would be a critical success factor. And you always want to measure your critical success factors through metrics. The number of design changes or new patents would be important probably for a pharmaceutical, new patents. Defects, training hours, things of that nature. Well, I'm going to pass on this. Okay. That is all that we're going to talk about in class for steps 1 and 2 of the 6-step process. The remaining month is steps 3 through 6. Right now, before lunch, in the next 10 minutes, I'm just going to run through these next 4 just to give us a little framework. So assessing the quality of the financial statement, and this is not about what stock paper it's written on or anything like that. This is the data on the financial statement what it should be. And as analysts, and you all are analysts in this class, you get to decide on the quality of the financial statement. And quality is not always, it doesn't mean that the company is trying to do something to put one over on stakeholders. It could just be that they need to make decisions and make estimates in order to produce their financial statements, and sometimes those estimates are wrong. I'm going to get the airlines wrong here, but you have Delta and you have American. Delta depreciates its airplanes over 15 years, and American depreciates it over 25. Right? That affects the financial statements dramatically. They're not trying to put something over, they just have different bases for depreciation. And thus their financial statements will be different. So you need to understand the quality of the financial statements, and as analysts, and this will be a big part of what we do in this class, decide, are we going to accept the financial statements as they are, or are we going to have to adjust them? This is going to feel uncomfortable to you as accountants, that as an analyst, you're going to have the chance to adjust the financial statements to reflect what it needs to reflect so that you can value the company. And that's the basis of this class. You don't just accept them. So asset quality, you want to make sure that the assets are appropriate, that they reflect those things for which they have economic benefit as a result of a past transaction, and that they had a measurable acquisition cost, and you can predict in some fashion reasonably well the future benefit that you should expect. And ultimately, those assets need to appropriately be categorized as current assets, investments, property, plant, and equipment, or intangibles. Liabilities should be broken down into current and non-current liabilities, and they should reflect expectations for the future sacrifices you need to make in order to satisfy obligations. And then this is all about the balance sheet, obviously. And then shareholders' equity is the residual amount. That's the value to the shareholder. That's the amount that is worth to the shareholders. So here's an old, an old Pepsi balance sheet. Here's the asset side of it. I assume you've all seen these before. This is the liability side of it and the shareholder equity side of it. The income statement provides information about the profitability over a period of time. So this is important. When you look at your balance sheet versus your income statement, the income statement is over time and a balance sheet is static at a point in time. So quite often you'll have to take two balance sheet numbers and combine them and divide by 2 to get the average across 2 years to compare it to an income statement number. You want to make sure on the income statement that the revenues have been substantially earned. You don't want to have items on the income statement for revenues that have not been substantially earned. And this is an area for earnings management, that fraud type thing, where you say you've earned revenues that you've not truly earned. And you want to make sure that you have satisfied your liabilities. So you've seen income statements. This would be Pepsi's income statement for a 3-year period. The statement of cash flows. This is your ability to generate cash. It differs from the income statement because the income statements are accrual-based. Statement of cash flows are cash-based. We'll talk about it more, but you can do it one of two ways. Almost everybody does it this way. You can either create a statement of cash flows that kind of looks like the income statement. It's just on a cash basis rather than an accrual basis. People don't tend to do that. Rather, you break it down: operating, investing, and financing, and you start with your income statement, and then you kind of reverse it out to get to a cash basis from your income statement. So this would be Pepsi. It starts off with their net income, and then you have all the adjustments to net income, positive and negative, where cash, and we'll talk about this more, where cash either didn't change hands and therefore should be subtracted out, or it did change hands. And it's broken down into operating, investing, and financing. The fourth step is analyzing profitability and risk. And you could do it through common size and percentage change financial statements. We'll talk about that in a second. And we'll have a whole chapter on ratios analysis. This is important for understanding the financial state of a company. Is it financially stable? So a common size, this is an income statement, does it based on a percentage from year to year, with sales being 100%, and then the components of costs being a percentage of sales. This allows you to get to net income as a percentage of sale, profit margin. It allows you to compare companies of different size to see how well they're efficient they are. So this is a way of comparing companies. Percentage change income statements compare year over year. So you can see how well you've done compared to the previous year. Sales have gone up 8.5%. Interest revenue went up 21%, and so on. You can see how well, have sales gone up more or less than different cost components. So sales have gone up 8%, 8.5%, and net income went up 18%. The next step in the process is projecting the future. And you actually do that. We're going to do it in this class 5 years forward. You all will project the future 5 years forward in this class. That's enough. The trade-off is the more years you project, the more precise it might be. However, can you really project 10 years in the future? So you have to choose a number of years where you feel like you can have a reasonable amount of precision. And it happens that all your companies are fairly stable companies. Mondelez might be a little bit of a challenge because they may not have a lot of history behind it. It'll be interesting to see what their financial statements look like. Hopefully Kraft has broken out the Mondelez component in the past, so you have some time series to work with. So you project the future based upon the current and the past. And you will be making assumptions. You have to look at the financial statements. Are some of the items in the financial statements non-repeatable? You don't want to include them going forward if you had a one-year windfall that's not going to happen again. So you have to understand and make assumptions about the financials. And FSAP, the software, will be your tool for making these forecasts. And then finally, you value the firm. And we'll learn 4 different models. This is where we get into finance a little bit. We'll learn 4 different models for taking the financial statements and your forecasts and converting it to, at the end, what's the price per share that it should be trading at today.